Hello there, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast.
Not quite as bad as the bit of radio that went out. Not radio, podcast, whatever it is we do every week. You know, been doing it for so long, can't even remember what we're talking about.
It's just a blur. It's all a blur. I can't remember what we've reviewed. I can't
remember. I didn't put out a question this week. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all. But if you were to put a question out, Callum, where would you put the question?
Well, the questions usually go, but not this week, on Untitled Film Podcast, both on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also find the full podcast up on YouTube as well, if you're not into the whole podcast revolution. Hello, Mum.
Exactly. I think that was quite a smooth transition to.
I think so. It wasn't intended, but I'm glad it went that way.
Well, I have to pick my moments with you. Otherwise, it's hard to get a word in edgeways sometime when you're ranting off about something. Unless you bring up Netflix, and that's my time to rant.
Yes, then it's your time. Or anything about streaming injustice.
Yeah, I've got some more of them, but I've parked them, and I'm not doing that this week. But there are some things that have annoyed me on streaming. Actually, trying to watch one of the movies for this week annoyed me on streaming because of the audio versions that were available.
Oh, yes, of course.
But anyway, we will talk about that later in the podcast. I think we're going to have a very nice early slide into the news this week. And I'm going to start off.
Go ahead. Please do.
I think. I am going to do a really fun bit of English irrelevant news. So, Callum, have you heard of a TV show called Gogglebox?
Oh, yes, of course. Everybody has, I think.
Well, not everybody. I'm sure some of our American listeners possibly haven't heard of what Gogglebox is. So Gogglebox is a TV series where they film people watching TV.
But it is better than it sounds, to be fair. It is
quite good. They pick certain families and you get to know them, and some of them you like and some of them you hate.
Some of them are very funny.
And they pick the kind of big news of the week or the big stories of the week, and quite often actually say something big happens. So obviously this week there's been stuff happening in Russia, and there's been stuff happening with submarines and or submersibles, I think is the correct term, and I suspect they will probably on this week's episode show those, and they'll comment on those things, and then they'll also show a comedy show, and then they'll show something else. But anyway, and that's taken a bit of an aside, I think is the word I'm looking for. But what channel is Gogglebox on?
It's BBC, isn't it? I've never actually watched it.
Oh my God.
Is it ITV?
Oh, you fucked up my... No.
I don't know.
Channel 4.
Is it? I've never watched it.
It's such a classic Channel 4 show. I've never really watched it, but it's like always on all the adverts on Channel 4, More 4, and...
I don't watch live TV, so...
Well, no, you watch the fucking streaming.
Kind of. Not the most legal of streaming.
Surely you watch all 4. Or whatever it's called now. It's been changed about 5 times.
Very occasionally, and I do mean very occasionally, but I've never seen an advert for Gogglebox in the time that I have.
Well, you are fucking behind the times.
Yeah, I don't watch it.
Wow. Anyway, ITV tried to poach you. That was my story, and I thought it was going to be a big revelation for you, and you fucking don't know which way is up. What is the point?
I've never seen Gogglebox. My mum has. If my mum was here, she'd be very annoyed at me, probably.
But it's big. It would be big news in England if ITV got it. It would be the biggest scandal since Channel 4 got the Great British Bake Off from the BBC, I would say. And that, for anyone in England, was a scandal.
For most people, yes.
Yeah.
I do know that went over, but...
Wow.
That's probably the only bit of news that I do know.
Do your bit of boring film news from some American people or something.
Yeah, no, it is.
Oh, the writers' strike.
Well, actually, no, because I was just saying just before we started recording that I had a bit of morbid news, but then I had to swap it out for something because it was a bit too morbid.
Get on with it.
So this is actually something I'm not particularly interested in. It's just that the more interesting stuff, it would be quite a downer for this podcast.
What if you're not interested in it? Why should we be interested in it?
So Luke Wilson, Greg Kinnear, who I do like a lot, and Molly Parker have set for a baseball film called You Gotta Believe. Sounds like it's coming straight to streaming near a streaming service near you.
Wow, what an interesting piece of news.
Directed by Ty Roberts, who previously worked on another baseball movie with Luke Wilson. You know, wake up, everybody.
That's what Luke... I can't even bother to say his name. It's not even the good Wilson.
No, that's true. It's not the most exciting. It's the
Although
least
actually,
exciting.
I would argue the better Wilson in Rushmore, but that's.
Do you mean the Royal Tenenbaums? Yeah,
I do mean the Royal Tenenbaums.
And so it's about a father who's dying, whose dream is to put together a little league team, and Luke Wilson.
What, Field of Dreams?
It's a very similar plot, I grant you. Even the Deadline article says a plot that's strikingly similar to Field of Dreams. But baseball movies don't really have a purchase over here. I think the only one really, like Field of Dreams, is the one occasional hit, and I think A League of Their Own is quite well known here, but otherwise it just isn't something we're interested in. So probably unlikely that this is too, but it really is just a case of there was something more interesting, but it was a bit too grim for today, and so I had to go with something quite quick and
Anyway, on to some news that people might actually care about. So a few months back we reviewed the series The Bear, which we both gave rave reviews for. There was a couple of really outstanding episodes. It's got a season 2, which for those of you in the States, you probably already got access to it. But us in Britain, as ever, are behind the times. And we are getting it. I think it's the 19th of July. It's early July or mid-July. And it will be coming to Disney+. But what we do have, which they didn't have in the States, is the advantage they will all drop at once, which Disney+ doesn't always do, which is quite exciting. So, yeah, The Bear Season 2 is going to be on a streaming service near you before they probably cancel it for some form of tax relief in a couple of years' time.
Quite depressing. And that's good for a season like The Bear because those episodes are only half an hour long. And I think with a show like that, it's kind of made to be binged, really. It's not really made to be watched in little piecemeal, episode by episode. Second bit of news for me is that a little while ago, I mentioned that Ethan Coen was moving out on his own because Joel Coen had already moved out on his own with the adaptation of Macbeth, and Ethan Coen had yet to do a thing by himself. And that was the announcement of the film Drive Away Girls. Now the trailer has just dropped, and it stars Geraldine Viswanathan, who's one of the big indie girls at the moment. Matt Damon is there. You've got a bunch of American character actors as the Coens like Bill Camp and people like that, and it looks really fun. It's kind of almost a getaway driving movie. It gave me the vibe of something like Baby Driver or something like that. Why are you turning me down? Can you turn me back up, please?
Well, I feel like I should take this show over. I think, I'm just not getting enough from you this episode, so I thought I'd turn you down.
Okay, can I come back?
Are you going to be interesting?
Well, this one is more interesting than the first bit of news.
If you say so.
It's a Coen Brothers, or half a Coen Brothers movie. Oh, Jesus, that was too loud. Half a Coen Brothers movie. And
half as interesting, some would say.
Well, Joel Coen is...
Great YouTube channel, by the way, half as interesting.
Joel Coen was very interesting on his own. I think we should give Ethan Coen the shot at being interesting on his own. Macbeth was very good. I liked his Joel Coen's version of Macbeth a lot. And I like Geraldine Viswanathan a whole lot. I'm surprised that the Coen Brothers news isn't interesting to you.
Oh, it is. It's just not mind-blowing, Anyway, I'm only taking the piss. Anything more to say on that?
No, just that.
Fair enough. Now I have played with your microphone volumes, we can go into quite nice and quickly today, I think. I think I've kept a good leash on how long we've talked about things. We can go into the main part of the podcast. And we're going to review two things that I am quite excited to review today. Callum, what two things are we going to review?
Well, the first is actually a double thing because there are two seasons of this show, but the first season is called Tear Along the Dotted Line. It's based on an Italian graphic novel. It's semi-autobiographical. It's kind of a comedy drama. And he put out a second season, which just came out in June. Both of them are available on Netflix, called This World Can't Tear Me Down, which deals about slightly different subject matter, where the first is sort of more of a coming of age. This one's more political. And then we're going to pair it with the film Persepolis, which came out in 2007, I believe, based on the graphic novel of the same name, which again is a autobiographical novel. That one is a lot more political, where the first one kind of dips its toe in.
Well, you say novel, though, they're both graphic novels.
Yes.
So Zerocalcare, Zerocalcare, I say his name right, has written a series of novels, and both of these are based on one of his. I actually don't know if the new season is based on one of his graphic novels, but the first season was certainly based on the kind of graphic novel that made him big. And obviously Persepolis is based on a graphic novel as well, which everyone should read if they haven't read it. Both are quite heavy, have comic moments though that kind of get you through the heaviness, and both have very heavily involved creators. I think they're both directed by the person who made the graphic novel in
yes,
both
they are.
cases.
Well, one is co-directed. Persepolis is co-directed by the Marjane Satrapi.
Yep.
And
although she has actually gone on to direct lots of films independently now.
She very much has.
Live action ones, but including the Marie Curie movie that was on Amazon Prime.
Yes, I think she's directed something like 4 or 5 films now. Yeah. She's quite prolific on her own now.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I will go do a quick synopsis of Tear Across the Dotted Line and This World Can't Tear Me Down.
Absolutely, yes.
So, Tear Across the Dotted Line, cut to Zerocalcare. I've said his name so many times in the last week correctly, and as soon as you stick a microphone in front of me, I can't say it anymore. Zerocalcare, which apparently means like zero lime scale.
Oh, really?
But that's not his real name.
No, of course, I figured it was a pseudonym.
But anyway, yeah. And he is in a bit of a negative headspace, going to some form of event. And he flashes back to the past and tells the story of him and his friends that kind of are leading up to this event. And he doesn't seem to be particularly pleased about going to this event. And along the way, you meet a girl called Alice that he says he can't remember her name, and her name is slightly robotic in tone. You meet his friend Seko, who always wants to go for ice cream whenever anything gets tough. And I've forgotten the name of his third friend. But anyway, she is Sarah, I think it is. I think it's Sarah.
Yes, it is. I've got IMDb up.
See, it is in there somewhere. She's a bit of a know-it-all, but also his kind of conscience. But he also has a conscience that follows him around, that is in the shape of a giant armadillo. That also talks to him. And that's where something with this show that is worth being mentioned is that it's quite, although it's talking about really real subjects, actually it's quite surrealist at times. And there has been comparisons to BoJack Horseman in that regard, in that the using of animals for certain people to denote the type of person they are and the characteristics they are. There's also these kind of surreal flight of fancies, and it's kind of very meta. And that's something that's carried through to the second season. And I don't want to spoil the ending of the first one. The second season is, I think, fast forward, about 5 or so years until post-COVID. And he is going to... no, he's not going to something. He bumps into an old friend he hasn't seen for 20 years. At the same time he bumps into this old friend, he starts noticing that these neo-Nazi posters have been put up around his town that all relate to this family of immigrants that have been moved into a local apartment. And this is a family that has been moved around the edges of Rome into the poorer parts of Rome for a few months. And every time they get moved around, these neo-Nazis start appearing and coming out of the woodwork. And again, it's about him, Seko, and Sarah, and their navigation of this. Callum, what did you think?
Yeah, it was all right. No, it was truly excellent. I thought it was really, really good. What it reminds me of is growing up reading graphic novels, because to be honest, it hasn't been something I've indulged in quite a few years, but I remember as a teenager just how important it was, because my brother Rory was a lot more into graphic novels than I was, but I would get things like Persepolis, like Watchmen, like Mouse, all the big ones And it all seemed so important when I was 16, 17.
I think Watchmen is probably lower down the important list than Mouse and...
Yeah, well, just in terms of how it felt at the age of like 15, 16, to get like these really important, all these texts would come in, and like you just devour them. Each one would seem kind of more important than the last, and you didn't know that artwork could be shown like this. You didn't know stories could be told like this, and they were often about young adults. They were often about trying to navigate the kind of adolescence up until adulthood, and then in my later 20s, I'd occasionally read one or the other, but that magic that reading those comics at the age of 17 had, it just wasn't quite there, because it's partly a nostalgia thing. I have to say that watching this was the closest I got to just being flashed back to that time. This felt like something that if I found this when I was 16 years old, it would be the most important thing. It's funny, it's dramatic, it deals very well with how to use the form, first in graphic novel, but then later on in animation. These shows for Netflix, both animated, in a way that can tell an adult story, but with flights of fancy, with magic realism, with the fact that he has an armadillo for a conscience. It just feels like something that if I saw this when I was 18 and 19, it would just seem like the most important thing ever. And what I like is that it takes the story along a little bit, because most of these books were about people in there.
For the siren there.
Yes, but there is a lot of car activity outside, so sorry if that bleeds
There's
in.
some big festival on near my house today, so apologies. Folkestone Council, come on, don't let people have fun. Like, just like don't let that happen.
At least for this hour.
People have got to record podcasts, they're really important.
Very important. But yeah, so it just, watching the show, it kind of felt important, and I like that it moved the story along, because these people, in the second show, they make a point that the characters are almost 40, and in the first show, I think they're supposed to be in their late 20s.
I think about 27.
Yeah, around that time.
Although the thing that throws me off slightly with that is the fact that there's a Rogue One poster in the background, but then I'm not sure if he's telling,
if those scenes are him telling the audience and then flashing back.
Yeah, I don't know quite where the flashbacks are, because this is another thing, is that both of them use a storytelling device of him telling the story.
Yes.
And because of that, the way they're structured, the voice actor who voices Zero, which in the Italian version is him himself, and in the British version is not him, it's someone who speaks English, but does the majority of the characters around him when it's him talking about it. Where there's a slight deviation from that is if it's a flashback scene where he wasn't there and he wasn't involved in the conversation, then it's in their correct voices. So there's the second series, it's done as an interrogation scene, and when he's talking about what happened in the lead up to him being interrogated, he's doing it in their voices, but when it's the other characters in their interrogation room, they're done in their own voices.
Yes, and there are several instances.
Confusing, but it works well.
It does work well in context, and in the first season there are similar instances. But yeah, so it's nice to see that it's happening to characters who are a little bit older. That, life can still be a bit of a mess. It doesn't magically become fixed at 23 or 24 or whatever. And that was something I liked. And I think maybe in a way that's why it worked for me as well, because it wasn't so much flashing back to a time when I was 17 reading about 18-year-olds. I was like, these guys are just a few years younger than me. And in fact, in the next series, they're older than me. And they're still kind of figuring it out. That's kind of nice to see. It's actually quite comforting. And then one of the big themes of the show is not comparing your life to other people. And so it helps put that in context. And no, I thought it dealt with adult themes in a very funny and relatable way. It's very emotional. But very funny, though. He's very neurotic, and it's almost Woody Allen-esque.
Boo.
Yes, boo. Hiss, boo. But we can find new Woody Allens now, like who aren't accused of horrible things. So this can be one of them.
And that's the police there. Going to get Woody Allen.
Yeah, go on, get him, lads. But yeah, no, I liked it a lot. And your thoughts, Johnny?
So I really pushed to do this. I watched the first season a little while after it came out. It just popped up on my Netflix one day. And I've got a complex relationship with adult cartoons because I love some of them. I love like BoJack Horseman and things. But oh my god, is there some shit out there? And even I've classed like Family Guy and stuff in that, which I know lots of people like, and sorry if you like it, but it's just lame. It's not very well done, in my opinion. And I'm right. But yeah, and I think you're right that a lot of the stuff that is really good quality actually tends to be the kind of almost like teen fiction-y ones that are kind of in the middle. But then I don't now identify with... I can still respect them, but I don't identify with them in the same way that I do with something like this. So this really worked for me on a lot of levels. I liked the animation style. I really liked the lead character and kind of like identified with him quite a lot and about a lot of things. I also just like the general politics of the show. It's quite left-wing and it kind of wears that very much on its sleeve, and I'm quite left-wing and wear that very much on my sleeve. I like the depictions of people that... Because the other thing you get with a lot of... And this is something where these comics and things quite often are better at doing, is when you watch TV, everything on TV, it tends to be upper middle class people to rich people and nothing below that, because that tends to be the people that can afford to become an actor or a writer or all these things. Not, you know, not
or a
always.
mic hitter.
But actually, I think there's quite a few, especially with the kind of growth of web comics and that kind of thing. There's quite a few people who aren't from those backgrounds who do it in this, you know, in their spare time, and can do these things. And I think it's nice that it shows someone from that background who's not necessarily, who's from that. So there's just a lot of things I like about it. Also, the soundtrack slaps. Like, it has so many good tunes in it.
So good.
Yeah.
Really liked it.
Like, really good, like, what would the word be? Like, I don't want to say indie, but lots of kind of, like, good music, basically.
Yes.
Like, I don't, and I mean, like, the soundtrack, the songs they've picked. Give me some examples, Callum. Tell me.
There's M83 in there. Band of Horses closes out the first season. So kind of indie vibe. Bunch of bands actually I wasn't that familiar with. A lot of Italian music, but in a similar kind of style to indie rock, but also kind of more synth indie as well.
And something I don't think we've really touched on is that both... So the first season, the overarching storyline, I think, is of loss, I would say. And again, I don't want to give too much away for anyone who hasn't seen it. And then the second storyline, I think, is just, you know, there's a certain level of politics in there, but it's also not judging people, and it's very anti-racism and anti-fascist and things like that. So they're quite dark, overarching, and growing apart from people as well. As
and on a personal level, it's a lot about guilt, because
and guilt.
He feels very guilty about not staying in touch with this guy that he lost touch with, and then came back into his life only to find that things have changed. Exactly.
So no, I just like a lot about it, really. There's not much I don't like about it, really. I think maybe that some of the secondary characters are maybe at times a bit two-dimensional, and maybe it's a little bit self-absorbed at times. But then I think that's kind of quite knowing, and I think it calls itself out on both those things.
I think it does. It does often. So, for example, this is something that's lost in the English dub, but they make fun of his voice, and of course it's the real guy voicing himself, and said, who's going to be complaining about my voice? And then a snapshot of all these Italian newspaper clippings saying, oh, his voice is rubbish, who's this guy voicing it, and things like that. So there's a lot of self-knowing things. Maybe they could have had slightly tighter control on where exactly we are in the timeline as well. Like you said, it's like, wait a minute, is he 38 there, or is he flashing back to 28?
I think the second season did a much better job of that. I think the first season, where there's kind of almost like three timelines going on at once, it doesn't always do such a good job.
Yes,
but then
I'd agree.
I suppose the other problem you get with that is, though, I respect that it kind of it tries to be grown up and say, you have to remember this dude, instead of trying to do that thing that some things do where it'll pop up in the corner, 1993, 1997,
of course.
Vienna in big writing across the screen or something. So it's kind of like... you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. They could have done something like change his T-shirt or something between the three time zones or times or something.
But even then, they make a joke about that because, as you say, the second season is framed around this interrogation. and he makes a joke about how I was supposed to look beaten up here, but I forgot to tell the animators. And then they have this joke where he goes to the animators, "You're going to have to do all that work again." The animator just looks about ready to kill him.
And then they're like, "So this is the compromise we came out with," which I really enjoyed as well. And I can probably believe happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I really love it. But yeah, any more to say on that?
No. I think we've covered quite a lot.
Well, that brings us to the advertisement break. And when we return, we will talk about Persepolis. And welcome back from the advertisement break.
You've already turned my mic down. I don't know why I let him do this.
I'd buy that for 50p.
For a 50 pence piece.
Which is worth probably about the same as $1 now. The pound, no, the other way around. It's probably worth about 5 cents because the pound is plummeting as we speak. Thanks, Rishi Sunak, you cunt. Anyway.
Wow, where did that come from?
That's...
Am I back?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm back.
You're back. Anyway...
Should we get on with the second bit?
Yeah, so Callum, tell us about Persepolis.
Okay, so Persepolis is co-directed by the subject of the comic, Marjane Satrapi, and it's set in 1970s Iran, and it watches as the events unfold, first through her eyes as a young child and her idealistic family, as just as the Iranian Revolution is beginning in 1979 with the death of the Shah. And it chronicles the events of what's going on in Iran from the mid to late 70s up until the early 90s. And it also follows Marjane's story as the Shah is assassinated and the Iranian Revolution begins. And they're idealistic and think, oh, great, everything's going to be fixed, only to find out that those who take power after are a whole lot worse. And as a way to try and keep her safe, they send her away to Vienna to a French-speaking school because she can speak French. And it chronicles her time there and just how much of a rough time she has before she has to come back. And it continues to chronicle her times as the state is getting worse and as rules are tightening and things are becoming a whole lot worse for her family up until the early 90s. So, yeah. Johnny, what did you think of Persepolis?
Yeah, it's all right.
Never gets old.
Well, yeah, you gotta keep the
bloody
memes
up
for the people that listen every week. If I don't do it, then they'll be upset.
There'll be 5 people there going, "I buy that." He's gonna interrupt him during the "I buy that for $1" bit. Hey, there it is.
They won't see the Rishi Sunak as a cunt bit coming, they will they?
No, not at all.
That's new. Maybe I'll keep it. Maybe that'll be my new thing every week. Anyway, no, I really love Persepolis. I've seen it before multiple times. I used to have the DVD of it. I've read the graphic novel. So, yeah. I love the style visually. I love the defiance of the character against the horrendous Iranian regime. Thanks to British. A bunch of cunts. For causing, they did cause that situation, really, if you really trace that line back. And I like the kind of coming of age story in it. I think it's a really good one to show to younger people, to explain the Iran-Iraq and the history of Iran and why Iran is like it is today. Again, thanks, British. And I just really like everything about it. I like the voice acting. So going back to something I said earlier in the show, so I was going to watch it on Studio Canal Plus. You have to say Plus. And they only had the French edit, which in some ways is fine. Obviously, you could argue that the original version of it is French, because that is the second language of the lead. You couldn't
argue it. It is the first language of the film.
Well, Iranian. The majority of the characters in Iranian. I can't imagine they're like standing around in Iran speaking French.
Well, no, but
and then they go to Vienna where the main language is German.
Yes.
So it depends how, like the original version that came out of the movie came out in French.
Yes.
And it was made partially by a French studio, but it's not just for Studio Canal, there are other studios involved, American studios, hence why there is an English dub. And actually something that's quite cool is that the person who voices the lead character does the English and the French dub. And the mother, played by Catherine Deneuve, is both the English and the French dub. And then everyone else has changed, but there's some really cool people in there. Her father's voiced by Sean Penn, who does a very good job. Her uncle is voiced by Iggy Pop, who does a brilliant job and is probably my favourite character in it. So it's a really nice version, and I think actually does a really good job of getting across the... what's the word I'm looking for? Getting across the... you don't feel like it's too much lost in translation, which, you know, can, with a bad dub, happen. Another thing that I like about Tear Across the Dotted Line and stuff is I think the translations, for the most part, you don't lose too much. I like most things about it, really. How about you, Callum?
No, pretty much the same. Like what you said there about not much gets lost, because in 90 minutes, it's got to give you a potted history.
I mean, it's tight.
Of both pre and post Iranian Revolution. And it's got to be in a way that's condensed enough, because they know young people will be watching it, because the target audience, it must be kind of teenage girls. Young adults, teenage girls, probably similar age to Marjane. And it's got to deliver it in a way that is both thorough, but not, of course, it's not lecturing people. It's not giving people a history lesson. It's got to give it enough so it has to mix entertainment and history. And it does it very well by... moments of great history will be followed by Marjane as a 13-year-old wearing a denim jacket saying punk is not dead, and kind of trying to get Bee Gees tapes and stuff like that.
No, she doesn't want the Bee Gees.
Oh no, she doesn't want the Bee Gees.
Iron Maiden.
Yes, she's bored of the Bee Gees, just as she doesn't like ABBA. And at that point I nearly...
ABBA's lame.
Yeah, I was about to yell at her, no, young lady, ABBA's fantastic. But, you know.
Haven't you seen ABBA Voyage in Iran in 1984?
Yeah, come on. The stuff in Europe is really harrowing, because it's there where she lets herself succumb to some personal dramas, and she even sums it up like, I've survived war, I've survived a revolution, and yet this is the thing, that a failed relationship is going to kill me. And so it manages to mix the personal and the global, the political very well, without either coming across as being skipped over. The animation is fantastic. It has, the very thick black contrast, white and black lines.
What the fuck is going on today? Is there a fucking coup in...
Maybe there's a serial killer or something.
Maybe.
On the loose. But the best bits of animation is it'll often, when it goes into a darker piece of history, it will go to this sort of charcoal like look, like a kind of wash of grey, but scratchy, and it's really quite moody. It really knows how to mix its styles, and of course it's all told in flashback, because of course Marjane, when she's making this film, is a young lady, and that's done in colour, and they know how to kind of jump back and forth. They also know how to make the film very funny, considering its subject matter. Like, you do find yourself laughing a lot, like at her and during her perils, when they're slightly on the sillier side. Her search for music, and like saying that Bruce Lee is my hero, and there's a moment when she kind of jumps out doing these kind of kung fu poses. So it knows how to match its styles, mix and match its styles. It's also very good at showing the Iranian people's side, because they make a point at one point saying... at one point they say something like, when you see people Iran, how they're depicted across the world, we're all screaming, throwing bombs at each other, and that's not how real people are. And I'll immediately flash back to, because we've mentioned several times before, the film Argo, where that's exactly like how the people of Iran are portrayed. But no, it's fantastic. There's not a foot wrong here. Brilliant.
I think it's something, and this is a broader one for both of these things, and just a broader thing in general. I think what they both do really well is tell bigger, more complex stories through people and their experiences, and actually puts a human face to things, when so much of life, news, media, films, all these things, podcasts, are not about people. They're about politics
or
situations events, or the lawyer that sued a company for 100,000 people, or it's never about this is a normal person and what's happening to them, and you rarely get something. There's something this is a total tangent, but something I really liked about the Cambodian War movie that Angelina Jolie did, where it was actually about just a family that trying to make it through the Cambodian genocide and things, and I just think there's not enough of these kind of real personal stories about real people in the world telling us what's going on. And I think actually sometimes a lot of stuff gets distorted. A lot of stuff becomes just numbers, and it's that whole thing of when something happens to one person, it's a tragedy. When it happens to 100,000 people, it's a statistic. And I think that's what both of these do very well. I think particularly Persepolis, with something that affected millions of people, has killed millions of people over the past 50 years, and is probably not wanted by the majority of people, just a small group of people in power, mainly men, because they get to do what they want. And the same thing with the kind of what's going on in the outskirts of Rome, and the racism, and actually how it makes them just not very nice places to live, because it's not, it's people bloody fascists and anti-fascists skirmishing on the streets together, and that doesn't make for a good environment, because then you get thousands of police cars going past you, like it's
happening in Folkestone, yes.
And I think that's what I like about both of them, is that they tell these stories through a personal lens and do it very well, and manage to tell a big complex thing in a very simple way, but also telling you a human story as well.
Yes, I'd very much agree with that.
But yeah, any more to say about them?
I don't think so. I think we've pretty much covered our bases. I think
that rounds us up nicely. So Callum, tear across the dotted line, and they will never. I can't remember the name of it.
I should get it up quickly.
Do.
Unless you get it up first.
I did have it and I lost it. No. This world can't tear me down.
Are we reviewing them individually or as a whole?
I think as a whole.
Okay. I think I'd edge towards 9 out of 10. To be honest, I think most people preferred the first season and the second
Although not
season.
Me.
Not you. I think just for its freshness, I preferred the first season by a hair, and I do mean like a hair. So I think, as a whole, 9 out of 10. And both, I think, are comfortable 9s. It's not like one is a 10 and the other's an 8, so I'm rounding up to a 9. I think both are quite comfortable 9s, but one, if I got into the microscopic of the review, it would be slightly different, and I do mean a hair. So 9 out of 10 overall. It's just a fantastic show. It's very funny and moving and personal, and it's the kind of feeling that comic books should give you.
I'm going to give it both a 10 out of 10.
Ooh.
I just really love them. I can't really fault much. Even when I started to come up with a thought, I thought, no, actually, it's quite smart in the way that it does that. And I just think people need to watch them. I think they're that good. I just think everyone should watch them, and then they'll learn more about themselves and more about society, and more about mental health and more about racism, particularly in Italy. And I think that's what people need to do. Watch them right now.
You heard him, folks.
But yeah, no, I really love them, and I'm sure I could pick holes in them, but no, I think they're great. And I think the other thing goes back to a point you said. It kind of reminds me of those things that I watched when I was like 16, 18, and was like, well, man, this really gets me. Catch You in the Rye just really gets me, but actually in a way that when I read those things now, I cringe, but actually, no, I don't cringe, Catch You in the Rye, but that kind of stuff.
It's now nice to have that feeling again.
But actually, when I watch this, I don't cringe. I'm like, no, they're bloody 40-year-olds. They're older than me.
Yeah, exactly.
They can act like this. So anyway, yeah.
It is nice to have that feeling again. That feeling has been lost for a long time. Like I can watch things and enjoy them, but there is a case for soul deadening that's, happens in your 30s and beyond. And when a show cuts through that, or a film or whatever, or a book or whatever, cuts through that, and you go, oh, thank God, I didn't know I could feel like that again. So yeah, thank God for this show for that reason.
Yeah. Taking all the cynicism out, really love it. And Persepolis.
That's perfect. It's a 10. Everything about it is brilliant. And it's often said that when we really, really like something, our reviews are quicker because there's not a lot to nitpick on. So our reviews were
There's no rants we could go into.
Yeah, there's not really a rant. It's like, yeah, it's really great. I love this thing. I really love this thing. And I love that thing. What did you love, Johnny?
I loved everything about it, and I just agree with everything you've just said.
Any more to say? Nah, I think we just loved it. So yeah, I just loved it. Everything about it is perfect. Just on a personal note, it was one of the first comics during that time when comics were, getting me, man, and everything felt fresh and new and amazing. It was one of the first. So I think Mouse was the first one that I think my godmother gave me, and this, I think, was her present when she realized that I liked Mouse. I think this was her present either the next year or the year after. So for a little while, it became a thing like, I'm going to get a comic and it's going to be really important as a present from my godmother. Which one is it going to be today? Persepolis, never heard of it, but let's get reading. And yeah, so on a personal level, is one of the first kind of important comics I read.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really love it. And it kind of helped start off a period of reading lots of those things. To be controversial, I was considering giving it a 9. And actually, my reason for giving it a 9...
Kill him.
...is kind of ironic in that I wish it was a bit longer.
Okay.
I want to see more of what she did as soon as she arrives back into France a second time. And I swear there is a Persepolis 2, and I swear that does go further into that. And I think they were both out at the time the film came out, and I wish it was...
There are several books, but I don't think it's about further stuff. I think it's just more fleshed out because it's a comic book. Kind of like we were talking about with Scott Pilgrim the other day, I think.
But yeah, I think that's it. I think there could be a few more bits that could be a bit more fleshed out. And I do feel something that it does that I kind of like, but I don't think it has the courage to do it enough, is the way it kind of cuts between chapters in the book. So it will just like fade to black and go to the next one. But then they don't always do that. So I think there's just something, something kind of in the editing and the structure that just doesn't sit 100% with me. So for that, I'm going to knock 1 point off. But it's close 10. And if you'd got me on a different day, maybe I'd have said 10.
So this is the last episode, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think we've both given it a pretty
fair
good
shake, I think. Yeah.
So
2 9.5s.
It's all thumbs up. Thumbs up from the two Johnny's podcast, whatever it's called this week.
Whatever we've decided on. It's only been a year, folks.
The Untitled Formula One podcast with Callum and
Potato.
Anyway. Watch out on our Instagram for questions and shit. And fuck Rishi Sunak. Bye.
Later.
Thanks, Rishi Sunak, you cunt.